The night my husband kissed his mistress in front of 200 people, I was 8 months pregnant and wearing white. He did not stumble into her. She did not surprise him. He put one hand around her waist, pulled her close, and kissed her like I was already gone. For a few seconds, the entire ballroom became silent. Then I walked past them, removed my wedding ring, and placed it in his mother's open hand. She looked up at me in shock. I told her to keep it safe until after the vote. My husband heard me. His face changed immediately. That was the moment he understood something was wrong. By midnight, he had lost his wife, his job, and the company he had been planning to steal from me. But the real story started 6 weeks earlier with a phone call from our bank. My name is Maya Bennett. I was 36 years old, married for 8 years, and expecting my first child. My husband, Grant Lawson, was handsome, confident, and very good at making people believe he was the smartest person in any room. We owned a Chicago hospitality company called Lawson and Bennett. We designed restaurants and produced high-end events. The company had started in an old warehouse that I inherited from my grandmother. I handled the money, contracts, and operations. Grant became the public face. He attended parties, spoke to reporters, and built relationships with wealthy clients. Over time, people began calling it Grant's company. I rarely corrected them. I knew what the legal papers said. I owned 52% of the voting shares, and the warehouse belonged to me alone. 3 years earlier, I had suffered a miscarriage. Afterward, I stopped attending most public events and worked quietly behind the scenes. Grant enjoyed the attention that came with my absence. When I became pregnant again, I stepped back even more. My doctor told me to avoid stress. Grant promised he would protect me and the baby. Instead, he began preparing a life without us. The first warning came when a bank employee called to confirm my approval of a $2 million bridge loan. I told him I had never approved it. He sounded nervous. He said the application contained my digital signature and listed our warehouse as part of the collateral. When I asked Grant about it, he laughed. He said one of his assistants had attached the wrong document and that the loan had already been canceled. His answer was smooth, but he would not look at me. That night, while he slept, I checked the secure company drive. The loan folder was empty. The next morning, I called Janelle Price, a forensic accountant I had worked with years earlier. I asked her to examine our books without alerting Grant. 3 days later, she found a company named Vesper Lane Consulting. We had paid Vesper Lane more than $800,000 in 14 months. The invoices were vague, and no real work was attached to them. Janelle traced the company to a woman named Sloan Mercer. Sloan was Grant's vice president of brand partnerships. She was also the woman who had started appearing beside Grant in photographs after I stopped attending events. I had met her twice. Once, she touched my pregnant stomach and told me Grant talked about the baby constantly. Remembering that touch made me feel sick. I wanted to confront Grant immediately, but Janelle stopped me. She said an affair was painful, but financial fraud was dangerous. If Grant knew I was looking, he could destroy records or move the remaining money. So I acted normal. I ate breakfast across from him, asked about his meetings, and listened while he complained about investors. Then he turned away and messaged someone beneath the blankets. Every day, Janelle uncovered something new. Grant had been negotiating to sell our company to a private investment group called Northstar Equity. The proposed price was much lower than the company's real value. Grant and Sloan would receive millions in secret bonuses after the sale. I would receive almost nothing because the documents claimed my voting shares had been converted into non-voting shares 6 months earlier. The authorization carried my signature. It was a forgery. The betrayal was no longer just an affair. Grant was trying to erase me from the business I had built. My attorney, Rachel Kim, warned Northstar's legal team that Grant did not have authority to complete the sale. Then she discovered another problem. Grant had told Northstar that our warehouse was company property. It was not. My grandmother had left it to me before I married him. Our prenuptial agreement clearly protected it. Without that building, the sale was worth far less. Grant had prepared a separate document that would transfer the warehouse into the company one day before the sale. All he needed was my signature. 4 days before our annual gala, Grant placed a blue folder on the kitchen counter. He said the papers created a college trust for our daughter. He told me we could sign them at the gala with our attorney present to make the moment special. I smiled and told him that was thoughtful. Inside, I was shaking. There was no college trust. The folder contained the warehouse transfer, hidden beneath pages of ordinary financial language. He was planning to use our unborn child to trick me out of my last protected asset. That night, I cried in the shower so he could not hear me. I was not crying because I wanted him back. I was grieving the man I thought I had married. The next morning, his mother, Diane, asked me to meet her for coffee. Diane and I had never been close. She often excused Grant's selfish behavior, so I assumed he had sent her to pressure me. Instead, she placed a small flash drive on the table. Grant had visited her house with Sloan. They thought Diane was asleep, but her security system recorded their conversation. On the recording, Grant said pregnancy had made me easy to manage. If I discovered the affair and became angry in public, he would describe me as unstable and tell the board I was unfit to participate in the company. Then Sloan laughed and said that after the sale, they could finally stop hiding. Diane's eyes filled with tears while I listened. She said she had spent Grant's entire life protecting him from consequences. This time, protecting him would make her part of what he was doing to me and her granddaughter. For the first time since my investigation began, I did not feel alone. Diane owned 8% of the voting shares. Together, we controlled 60% of the company. We made a plan. Rachel scheduled an emergency shareholder meeting during the gala. Janelle completed a fraud report. Northstar paused the purchase, and our bank froze the suspicious loan. We decided to let Grant walk onto the stage believing he had won. On the afternoon of the gala, I received an anonymous message. It said, "We're white tonight. You deserve to look like the only honest person in the room." I later learned Diane had sent it. The gala took place on the top floor of a downtown hotel. Our company logo glowed across a wall of enormous screens. Grant looked surprised when I arrived. He had told me the event would be too tiring and arranged for a nurse to stay with me at home. I told him I would not miss such an important night. Sloan stood near the stage in a dark blue dress. When she saw me, her smile disappeared. Grant took my arm and led me toward the front table. He whispered that I should sign the blue folder before the speeches began. I told him I wanted to read it one more time. His fingers tightened around my arm. Then Diane approached us. Grant released me immediately and put on his public smile. Grant gave a speech about loyalty, vision, and family. He thanked Northstar for believing in his leadership. Then he announced that Lawson and Bennett was entering a new era. The sale was not final, but he spoke as if it were already done. He invited Sloan onto the stage and introduced her as the future chief brand officer. People applauded politely. When they stepped down, Sloan looked directly at me. Then she wrapped her arms around Grant and kissed him. Maybe she wanted to humiliate me. Maybe she believed I would scream, cry, or run from the room. That was what their plan required. Grant hesitated for less than a second. Then he kissed her back. The room went silent. I could feel everyone watching me, waiting for the pregnant wife in white to fall apart. But grief had already visited me in the shower. I had no tears left for that ballroom. I walked toward Diane. I removed my ring and placed it in her hand. I told her to keep it safe until after the vote. Then I turned to Grant and asked him to return to the stage. He tried to laugh. He said I was tired and needed to go home. I said I was exactly where I needed to be. Rachel stepped forward with the meeting notices. The screens behind us changed from the company logo to Janelle's audit summary. I did not show private messages. The facts were more damaging than gossip. The screens showed the payments to Vesper Lane. They showed the false loan application. They showed the forged shareholder authorization. They showed the hidden retention bonuses and the attempted transfer of my warehouse. Grant said the documents were misunderstandings. Then Rachel played a short part of the security recording. Everyone heard Grant say I would sign because I was easy to manage. That was the moment Sloane stepped away from him. It was almost funny. She had kissed him when she thought he was powerful. Less than 10 minutes later, she did not want to stand beside him. Grant demanded that security remove me. The head of security looked at me instead. The ballroom was operating under a contract with the building owner. I was the building owner. I told security that Grant was no longer authorized to direct them. Then the vote began. With my shares, Diane's shares, and the employee trust, we had enough votes to remove Grant as chief executive immediately. The board froze his accounts, suspended Sloane, and authorized a full independent investigation. North Star's attorney stood and confirmed that the purchase offer had been withdrawn. Grant stared at me as if I had become a stranger. The truth was simpler. He had never bothered to know me. He thought my quietness was weakness. He thought pregnancy made me helpless. He thought love meant I would keep forgiving him while he took pieces of my life. He was wrong about all three. Security escorted Grant and Sloane out through separate doors. I finished the evening by speaking to our employees. I told them their jobs were safe and their retirement accounts had not been touched. I promised transparency, an outside audit, and a new election for the board. My voice shook only once, when my daughter kicked beneath my ribs. After the room emptied, Diane tried to give my ring back. I closed her fingers around it. I told her that part of my life was finished. The legal process lasted almost a year. The final audit found that Grant and Sloane had diverted more than $1 million. Sloane blamed Grant, and Grant blamed Sloane. Their great romance lasted exactly 11 days after the gala. Grant pleaded guilty to financial crimes, received a prison sentence, and surrendered his shares. Sloane received probation and was ordered to repay what she had taken. I never had to destroy them. I only had to stop protecting them from the truth. My daughter, June, was born healthy 6 weeks after the gala. I did not use her as a weapon against Grant. When the court allowed contact, I followed the rules. She deserved a childhood that was not built around my anger. Diane became the grandmother I never expected. She was in the hospital when June was born, and she stood beside me through every difficult month that followed. I also changed the company's name. 1 year after the gala, we reopened the warehouse as Bennett House. The employees voted for the new name. We held the opening celebration in the same ballroom where Grant had kissed Sloane. This time, I stood on the stage with June in my arms. Behind me were the people who had kept the company alive. In front of me was Diane, crying for a very different reason. For years, I believed strength meant holding everything together, even when the person beside me was tearing it apart. Now I understand that sometimes strength is quieter than that. Sometimes it is making one phone call to the bank. Sometimes it is reading the page someone hopes you will skip. Sometimes it is walking through a silent ballroom, taking off a ring, and refusing to be ashamed of another person's betrayal. Grant believed that night would leave me empty-handed. Instead, the night I took off his ring was the night I finally took back my name.